Welcome to the Autism in Black podcast, where we focus on all things autism and the Black parent experience. Our goal is to always educate, support, and empower parents to advocate for not only their children, but themselves. Hello, and welcome to the Autism in Black podcast. I'm Maria Davis-Pierre, a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida and America's #1 autism advocate for Black parents. I am the founder and CEO of Autism in Black, Inc., where we aim to include the excluded. Today, we have Dr. Tara Regan, who is the executive director and founder of Autism Grown Up, located in North Carolina. Autism Grown Up is a nonprofit organization that supports autistic individuals, families, and professionals as they prepare for and navigate adulthood. Tara is an autism sibling to 2 autistic adult brothers and has been an autism professional for over a decade. From working at Camp Royale to direct care work to research in schools, she has worked in a variety of settings focused on supporting autistic individuals find success in their day-to-day to building meaningful lives as adults. I'm really excited about having Dr. Tara on today's episode because a lot of times we don't get the information in our communities about our children transitioning to adulthood. We don't really know how to navigate that and what it looks like. So I'm really happy to have Dr. Tara on to provide us with resources to tell us how we can best support our children and our loved ones. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Autism in Black podcast. Today, I'm very excited. We have a special guest. We have Tara with the Autism Grown Up podcast. Everybody say hi to Tara. Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited to have you here. As some of you know, I was on her podcast, and I'm very appreciative for her to return the favor and be on our podcast to let us know about, autism growing up, because, that's something in our communities we really don't like to talk about. So I have done the introduction and your bio already, but I want you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem at all. So glad to be here on your podcast and that you have it going, and to be a guest on here is so exciting. And so thank you. Yeah, so I am a lot of different things in the autism community. My sister and I were joking because she was putting together a panel for her autism club on campus. And she was like, you could really be any of the 3, like a sibling, a family member, a professional, and a researcher. But yeah, because I am all of those. I am an autism sister, a big sister. I have 2 younger brothers on the autism spectrum. They're both in the growing up stage. So that's why they are the main reason why I started Autism Grown Up. Tyler is 27, going on 28 in January, and then Tanner just turned 19 in November, which is just so bizarre as a big sister to think about. And then I've been an autism professional in the community, doing a wide variety of things from social work, direct care practice, working in recreational therapy. So I worked at a camp for many years, still do, also participate in a lot of different training programs. And then recently finished my PhD in education, where I focused primarily on the transition to adulthood and looked at self-advocacy and how factors may predict self-advocacy for teens on the autism spectrum. And as I was looking out in the job field after my PhD, I realized there are very few positions focused on the transition to adulthood and just broader lifespan type of things. So even just in terms of the lack of reach and lack of resources from any organizations, not to mention just research centers, it's just a huge gap. It's a huge cliff after high school. So that's where I started Autism Grown Up, and we are now a nonprofit. And we have a community. We kind of all centered on getting conversations going between everyone within the autism community. So we're talking about adults on the autism spectrum, family members, professionals, all coming together in one place to talk about adulthood and day-to-day things. And then we also produce a wide variety of resources through our resource center. And one of the resources that we do offer is the Autism Grown Up podcast.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, I love your resources because, as you said, when it gets to after high school, things dramatically decline as far as resources.
Yeah.
I like to, even when I'm talking with fellow autism parents, it's like, they don't think that our children actually grow up into adults and still need
Mm-hmm.
resources. Some of the waiting lists are like 3-4 years long. And it's like, we all know that any kind of gap in services can have a regression. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing and how you're advocating out here. Another thing that I want to touch on with you is, when do you think that, us as parents of children who are autistic or caregivers, when should we start thinking about adulthood for our children and what that looks like for them?
So this is not an easy answer for a lot of parents to hear sometimes. Especially I've found, so I'm in North Carolina, and we think that we have a lot of resources here because we have the Teach Center, we have a variety of other big autism resources in the community. But I always like to say you should start as early as possible. So just start today. Whatever age your child is, you should start thinking today. So when I have a table out at a conference or an event and I see some families come up to me, they start turning away because they're like, oh no, my child's 5, they're 3. I'm like, no, come back. You need to come over and talk with me because you need to start today. Because there are so many different, not to mention you already said that the wait list can be very long. The wait lists are actually up here in North Carolina, 10 years to get services.
Oh my goodness.
So these families should be applying for the Medicaid waiver as soon as they possibly can. And then when they finally do get those resources, hopefully those would link up with what they're currently doing in the community. So I always encourage families, when they're thinking about adulthood, to think about specific skills and the supports that will be promoting success in adulthood. So these are things like self-advocacy and daily care skills, independent living, and then supports of like getting out in the community and knowing who your people are that you go to, who are the people that you can turn to in. Maybe it's a store that your child likes to go to all the time, or a restaurant, or other like local small businesses. Those are great places to have people that are on your side, that you've developed relationships with. There's a lot of great meetup groups now, so I point those actually to a lot of my families now.
Oh, perfect. And we'll have some of those resources in the show notes for everybody as well. I know for me and a lot of the parents that I've talked to, when dealing with our children and, advocating for them, everything is so present focused for us. Like, we're in the moment. So a lot of times it's hard to think about 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And also because things change so much, with our children. My daughter changes so much in a year that sometimes it's hard for me to even think about, what the next steps are, because sometimes I just don't know. So for the parent who just doesn't know where to start, what can they start doing today? What are some of the things that they can say, okay, this is something that will help my child in adulthood?
Absolutely. There are a few things focused on independence that I always like to hone in on, because without us realizing, we can take some time to kind of take stock of what are the things we're doing for our child today that we would want them to be doing by themselves in the next couple of years. We tend to give a lot of prompts. This is something that special education teachers take a lot of data for themselves on in terms of IEP goals. Ideally, they're supposed to be putting those in there, but those are things that I encourage parents to be thinking about too, like how many times are you telling your child to brush their teeth in the morning? What are ways to kind of back off from that so they don't become prompt dependent over time? Because that's also kind of the shadow side of not building independent skills over time, is that your child can just eventually become so dependent on you telling them to go brush their teeth. So something that can help with that is creating a visual support or a checklist that your child can go through. So yeah, independence is a main thing. And the other part of it is self-advocacy. So providing choices, giving opportunities for your child to make their own decisions, and ownership of that can help them along the way too. And that also increases their motivation for doing some other activities that that they're not the biggest fans of too.
Perfect. I love that you talk about the self-advocacy portion and getting their opinion. I think a lot of times that because, our children, our siblings, people in our family have the diagnosis of autism, a lot of times we think that they are not able to think for themselves or have an opinion. And a lot of times when I'm asking my daughter's opinion and, giving her that time to process, people are like, you're asking her. I'm like, yeah, she has an opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But she does have an opinion. And, I want to include her in those things. So I'm very happy you brought that piece up. And then the independence. So, in the Black community, this is where things get tricky sometimes with the independence and the self-advocacy, because, yes, our children are 18, but a lot of times, we're thinking if you're still in our home, you are still a child, as well as the caregiver portion of it and letting those reins go. So, in the Black community, a lot of this talk is difficult for us thinking about, our children growing up and then them being 18 and technically, being an adult, but us still having to make decisions. So, how do you navigate that when you work with Black families, and what advice do you give them?
Yeah, so this has definitely become a major theme that I focus on, probably first with Black families, because it does increase their buy-in towards thinking about other people come do services too, because I think a lot of families I've worked with, not just Black families, but also families of color broadly, do not really apply for the Medicaid services, at least the families I've worked with, because they are unsure what those look like too. But so eventually we get to that point of talking about that. But the main thing is kind of breaking down what chores and what day-to-day things could look like, and kind of start with those first steps there. And also bringing in, if they have a chance to come see the student in the classroom, I found that can be really helpful too.
And then for our autistic individuals who are 18 and they're going to college and things like that, where the parent doesn't even have, a lot of say, because at that point, the child has to take the reins over. So the parent can't there's no IEP meetings, families for college level, for those of us who don't know that, there's no IEP meetings. The IEP does not go over into the college level. The 504 plan does.
Right.
So, usually we're so used to having the meetings yearly, having these goals created. And then when, your child goes to college, that all stops. So how does the parent prepare for that, as well as preparing the child for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is also a tricky area too, but I tend to like to introduce this as early as possible. So parents get more used to this by the time their child is reaching 10th, 11th, 12th grade, is getting their child to come to the IEP meeting. It doesn't have to be the whole meeting. It could just be a segment of it. A lot of times I'll have a student just prepare a quick PowerPoint or a drawing, just of things that they're interested in, some of their goals, those types of things. And of course, that kind of grows in intensity or more involvement from the student as they get older, to get them more involved in the IEP meeting, getting them more involved in the goal writing process, and make the meeting itself more student focused and sometimes a little bit smoother overall for everybody if the student's in the room. But that also helps a lot of families, especially a lot of Black families I've worked with, is I've actually had kind of a separate IEP meeting. We didn't call it an IEP meeting at the time because, of course, you have to have everyone in the room, but kind of introduced the idea of the IEP meeting with the student being there involved in the process. And that helped a lot of parents. They tended to find the idea more of something of interest for them or more motivating to have their student in the room, because then they knew that they would be on their side too. Yeah, so then also getting students to advocate during those processes in high school on building upon the IEP meeting and maybe getting them to request their own accommodations and building upon helping them advocate for their needs while in school can promote them being more successful in college in requesting their 504 plan and their accommodations, because that's also on them. Like, the parent cannot have any input whatsoever once our child gets to college. It's all on the student.
And I think that is, so not what we're used to. And I love the idea of having the child in their IEP meetings, which, starting at 16, they're actually supposed to be in their meetings because that's when transition planning should start. But I always recommend, if you guys can start in middle school around that age, that, have your child start to attend the meetings at that point. Because as Tara has said, it's never too early to start thinking about, what the future may hold for your child. So as early as possible and have them in the meeting. And I love that idea about the PowerPoint for them to, express what they're into and things like that. I love that idea. So
and it helps. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It just helps make the whole thing a lot smoother overall for everybody.
Yes, I never would have even thought about a PowerPoint. So I'm actually going to start telling the parents that I work with, and to have their child create a PowerPoint, or, even a social story, anything that, they're able to do to show what their interests are. I think that's a great idea to have them showcase that in that way. Because a lot of times, some of our children don't want to be talking and have that center of attention in those meetings. It can kind of cause anxiety. So I love that those are different ways that they can still communicate and get across to the team what they're interested in. So for the child who's, let's say, is 21 and, their parent hasn't even thought about, this transition to adulthood, even though they're in adulthood, what would you suggest for them to start doing today to help them with that independence level and the self-advocacy, and what resources are out there for them that they can go to? Because, at this stage at 21, a lot of things are not out there for them. So what would you suggest if the parent has not done anything?
They haven't done anything, they can definitely come to the Autism Grown Up website. We've got a lot of great resources on this particular stage, and because a lot of families are in this boat, unfortunately, they are learning that special ed services end at a particular age. Maybe they didn't know, some families unfortunately don't know that they can go until 21, and it's too late and their child's about to graduate, or thankfully they're able to extend until 21. Our site is definitely more of an online resource. We are able to contextualize based on where you live. If you get in contact with me, I'm happy to chat with you all about that. There are a lot of also great resources from local autism societies about this, especially the Autism Society of North Carolina. I found that they have a lot of great transition to adulthood resources out there, kind of just like a checklist. One of the main things that we have is a lifespan checklist. So right at 21, we have a whole thing of these are the things to looking at where you are with services in the community. Have you applied for the Medicaid waiver and Social Security income? Because that's also a financial support that many adults with disabilities, including adults on the autism spectrum, can apply for. And then looking at options in terms of, do you want to pursue any further post-secondary education with your child? Do they want to go look for a job? There are a lot of great job resources out there now. There's a great one called Higher Autism, and I can send you the link for that. And they have a lot of great information on career exploration. If your child hasn't started thinking about careers at all whatsoever, they're a great resource for that. And they also give you a set of ideas of what it takes to get to the point of developing career interests, helping your child along the hiring and interview process for getting a job. Jobs are a major thing, especially for adults on the spectrum, because even research shows that even like 6 years out of school, only 10 to 20% of adults on the spectrum are employed whatsoever. So if they're unable to get to any work-based experiences before 21, that's totally fine. That's still something they can start then. So those are kind of the main areas, looking at career experiences, looking at post-secondary education options, and then community services.
And then for the autistic individuals who don't have, the support of parents and caregivers, and they're navigating it on their own, would those same supports resources be available to them to go to and look at and, help them get their resources for employment, or if they want to go to college, or, whatever they want to take for their next step?
Yeah. They're actually, most of these resources are written like directly to the adult on the spectrum. So parents who are looking for this information could actually pass this along to their adult children too.
Oh, I love that. And that also reinforces, independence and things like that. Because I know, a lot of times, we want to be careful of parents. I'm talking to myself and you out there of ableism, and, how we don't think that our children can do certain things, but they're perfectly capable of, doing these things and having the independence if we just let the reins go just a little bit. I know that's scary for a lot of you, including myself, because I am a helicopter parent, and not just to Malia, but to my twins as well. I'm always hovering, so I have to get used to their independence, and it is scary for me, but, it does also show that, we have prepared them, to have that independence. So, just let the reins go just a little bit.
Yeah, I like to say, let it go just a little bit, and you can see that you're close enough to see what happens. And if they fail, that's okay. That's totally fine, especially when they're so young too. But also when they get older, that is part of like just accepting that person's dignity and understanding who they are, and looking back on yourself that when you were their age, you were also making mistakes too.
Yes, and I have made a lot of mistakes, but that might be for another show. So, what advice do you want to leave for our listeners, about adulthood and transitions?
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing is to start today in terms of thinking about adulthood. And also start thinking about that with your child on the autism spectrum, and other family members involved, because they're a part of the support network too. And other people that are part of your support network, they are a part of your child's support network as they get older. It all takes a village for sure. And start working with your child and thinking about what are their goals for the future. You can be having these conversations with them in whatever ways that you connect with them best. And just keep having conversations, keep trying to find ways to empower them to make their own decisions, whether that is starting small with just giving choices at different meal times, or different things at night when they're getting ready for bed. Do they want to read a book or watch the show with you? That type of thing. And that will build over time.
I love that. So tell the listeners how they can find you.
So they can find me. I'm all over every social media platform just to get our word out. But the main place that they can find me is on Instagram, where I am at Autism Grown Up. And then they can also go on our website, which is www.autismgrownup.com.
Yes. And can you tell us a little bit more about your community? I have to tell you guys, I'm a part of her community, and I get a lot of information from her community. So if you have the chance, please join. You can join now. Like I said, Malia is 7, but I'm already a part of her community.
Yes, we are so happy to have Maria in our community because, we are growing. We have almost 200 members, and it's people from all over the world, too, who just want to connect and learn more about adulthood. And we would love to have you there.
Yes, and I will have all of the resources we talked about today in our show notes, as well as all of Tara's Instagram, Facebook, her website. All of that will be in the show notes. So I just want to thank Tara for coming today and talking with us and sharing all of this great information.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much again for having me.
And thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you in the next show. If you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can always be notified when a new episode drops. To get the resources shared on today's podcast and the show notes, make sure to go to autisminblack.org/podcast. And be sure to share your takeaways from the show on IG Stories and Twitter using our official hashtag AIBPod so that we can find them and share them. And if you want to continue the conversation from today's episode, make sure to join our Autism in Black podcast Facebook community. And please make sure to answer the questions to gain entry. Thank you for listening and joining me this week. Have a good one.